Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this iconic pub. We're delighted to say our main guest has arrived. His plane only touched down at Shannon about 40 minutes ago, so he's done very well to get here in time. Let me tell you a little bit about the evening.
Had a shower, so I don't stink.
My name's Thurs, I'm from Limerick Writers' Centre, and this is the fourth in a series of plaques that we are putting in different places around to commemorate and to record the literary history of Limerick City. And tonight we're going to commemorate the memory of Richard Harris, actor and writer. And we'll tell you more as the evening goes on. But first, I'm delighted, we were delighted to be involved and invited to work with the Richard Harris Film Festival. I'm going to introduce you to Zeb Moore. But I have to say, I think in a few years' time we will be standing around Limerick and the Richard Harris Film Festival will be a major event on the international trail of film festivals. And it's certainly been moved to another level. I do hope all of you here tonight come and support in the next few days. But let me introduce you to the chairman of the Richard Harris Film Festival, Zeb Moore.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'm delighted that the mic's at this level. Guys, welcome to what is the beginning of the Richard Harris International Film Festival. I have nothing prepared because I've spent the last 2 months working my ass off getting this together for you guys. I'm delighted that Jared is here with us again, and we've got special guest Sean Cronin. I see Bill O'Reilly, I see lots of faces here that I recognise. I'm really delighted that you're supporting it. I'm also delighted that we've stepped it up a gear and we're looking at collaborations throughout the city, and one of them is with the Limerick Writers' Centre for this evening's unveiling. So I'm really pleased about that. I'm going to keep this really short. I'm going to keep my talking for tomorrow night. So if you want to carry on, I'm really glad and delighted to see you all here. Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zeb. The Director of Limerick Writers' Centre is Dominic Taylor. Many of you will know him. Dominic doesn't like being praised, but he deserves praise. Dominic was there at the beginning, really, when the Poets' Theatre at the White House was revived, and over the last years he's done so much for literary life in Limerick, whether it's instituting a poetry reading at the Loch Bar on the Nail, running writers' courses, so much, and the city has a lot to be thankful for. So the Director of Limerick Writers' Centre, Dominic Taylor.
Thanks very much, Donald, for those kind words, and thank you all then for the privilege of allowing me to stand here and speak to you. In the early summer of 1968, the year of flower power and the year of wearing flowers in your hair, Richard Harris had a hit single which reached number 4 in the British charts. The song was MacArthur Park, and I'm sure there are at least a few people here who will remember listening to that song on Alan Freeman's Top 20 on the BBC at 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoons. There's a line in that song, a dramatic line: "I'll never have that recipe again." That line, "I will never have that recipe again," expresses a fear that all creative people, actors, writers and artists, know only too well. It echoes the challenge which all artists face in getting something from the province of the imagination, the challenge of getting a precious cargo all the way from your head and berthing it safely on the white paper port of the page. The Greek poet Constantine Kathafi has described this so well. He compares it to how a precious cargo is transported on a ship. The nature of your cargo is very fragile. And despite all the care in the world, many of these fragile goods break on the journey. And many more will break when being unloaded on the shore. And sometimes the crew make mistakes and throw some of your precious things overboard. You will never get all of your precious cargo, that elusive poetic idea, onto the page. And once you have lost it, you will never, as Richard Harris said, you will never have that recipe again. Many of Caffafi's poems were translated into English by our own Limerick poet, Desmond O'Grady. In the late 1950s, there was an artistic triumvirate in Limerick, comprising of Desmond O'Grady, Richard Harris, and the artist Jack Donovan, who knew all about the creative process, who knew all about that wonderful, private and intimate journey of delivering a precious cargo, either onto a canvas, a page, or the stage, who knew the dangers and fears of never having that recipe again, who knew about making the most of that creative recipe once it had been gifted to them. Desmond O'Grady often recalled those early special years in Limerick, of walking up O'Connell Street with Richard Harris and Jack Donovan and making their way to the People's Park, with the three of them seeing the People's Park as their Parisian Luxembourg Gardens, the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris where poets and artists are celebrated. But the Limerick city where these three young artists grew up was, in the words of O'Grady, a place where the houses are quiet, the children are few, and the lovers are fewer still. The voice on the radio, O'Grady recalls, gives news of events, revolutions, social reforms, and new intellectual movements in lands with more future than this one presents. The three of them wanted to get away to experience these new intellectual and social movements. O'Grady headed to Paris, and Harris went to London, where he enrolled in the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. After completing his studies at the Academy, Harris joined Joan Littlewood's theatre workshop. He began getting roles in West End theatre productions, starting with Brendan Behan's The Quare Fellow in 1956. But let us just think again of Harris and O'Grady and Donovan, walking up O'Connell Street, across Barrington Street to the People's Park. We live, and our parents and grandparents lived, in a Georgian city. A Georgian city which, like similar European cities, speaks the language of classicism. And I think that language, that influence, can shape how we live and how we create. Whether rendered in verbal or architectural language, it is about, as Harris himself intimated, living honourably and well. We must not forget that these streets, these Georgian streets, have a direct cultural connection to mainland Europe of the 18th century. And we're talking about much more than an English connection here. A lot of European classicists came directly to Ireland. Limerick was planned by the Italian engineer Davis Ducart. He came straight here and not via England. The designs of many of the buildings in our city have a dignity, a distinction, and a beauty. And I think it is inevitable that either consciously or subconsciously we are influenced by this. Nothing is created in a vacuum, and value comes from using our past to create something new. In remembering Richard Harris today, let us celebrate a Limerick that through O'Grady and Harris and Donovan and others, let us celebrate a Limerick that has rediscovered an intellectual and artistic confidence all of its own. An intellectual tradition that was indeed, as I have alluded to, always there. Let us celebrate a confidence and a way of looking at things which is different to be found in other parts of Ireland. And this is especially relevant now, as we make a bid for designation as European City of Culture in 2020. And if you want evidence of this, then just listen to two recent RTE Radio 1 documentaries. One on Richard Harris by the journalist Joe Jackson, and the other an archive programme on the great Limerick artist Sean Keating, which was presented by John Bowman. There are some striking similarities between Keating and Harris. Both came from large families. Harris was one of 8 children, Keating was one of 11. Life was not easy for either man. As Harris tells us on Joe Jackson's programme, I never remembered getting a new suit, bike, or anything new at all. Life was similar for Keating. But what comes across in both programmes is an authentic and confident Limerick voice. What we hear is a voice and an attitude in which any kind of nonsense about the arts is not tolerated. The accents of Keating and Harris may be different, but the tone is very similar. Harris tells Jackson in a good-humoured way that he, Jackson, a Dubliner, sounds pretentious. There is humour here, of course, but yet Harris is telling us that he has no time for pretentiousness. In the Bowman programme, Keating denounces pretentious critics. Also on Bowman's programme, Keating declares that art is 90% communication, and if you want to communicate, you must speak the common language, and the common language is the language which every man understands. In other words, what Harris and Keating are telling is that they have no time for grandiosity or ostentation. This is very much in keeping with the ideals of the Limerick Writers' Centre in their continuing work in democratising literature in Limerick. From both programmes, what emerges is a Limerick which is proud of its arts and cultural tradition. We are delighted then today to inaugurate this plaque to Richard Harris. This venue will now become a stop on our literary walking tour of the city. It will become part of an itinerary for visitors to Limerick who wish to walk in the footsteps of the writers who found inspiration here. The strength of our literary heritage is a significant component of the cultural history of our city, which I have been speaking about. Our walking tours will allow people to trace the footsteps and visit the inspirational haunts of our local writers, several of whom, and particularly Richard Harris, have made a major contribution to defining what our Limerick cultural tradition is all about. Thank you very much.
And you can see why Dominic Taylor is director of the Limerick Writers' Centre, can't you? Wonderful, Dominic, thank you very much. Great pleasure now, and we're delighted and honoured that Jared has travelled so far and is coming here tonight to unveil the plaque behind us. Now, the plaque won't be staying behind us, but it's much easier to unveil it, let you all see it here, and then at a later stage we'll put it outside in its place on the wall. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jared Harris.
Thank you so much, everybody. I apologise for being late. Thank you for your patience. No, I was going to ask you to take a picture of me.
Yeah, you need to unlock it.
Just swipe that. It always works out a way to get in there. Yes, so thank you all for your patience. I think that my father would be absolutely delighted to be part of the not of this festival and the association with the literary walk. Literature is very important to my dad. You know, he quite often in the Bahamas, where he lived, he would disappear for a couple of days, and he'd just take a pile of books up to his bedroom, and he would read, and he was very happy doing that. But you know, mostly because he had 3 rowdy boys, and he was probably fed up with refereeing our fights. And I have to tell you as well that he never bought anything for himself, really. He'd spend, you know, he's a very generous person, but he never spent money on himself. And the only 2 things that he ever, you know, splashed out on was a Queen Anne piss pot. So he didn't have to get out of bed in the middle of the night. And first editions of Beckett and Joyce and Yeats and Oscar Wilde, and those he treasured. And but other than that, he never spent any money on anything for himself, you know. So this was near and dear to his heart, and I can't tell you how he's smiling right now, and bless you for that. my father had a book of poetry published, and as in all things with him, things never go smoothly. He wrote a poem that attracted the attention of the Catholic Church. There are too many saviours on my cross. And he was invited to the Vatican to meet the Pope, to present a copy of his book and to meet the Pope. Because they felt, they understood the non-violent aspect of this poem was important, and they wanted to have a meeting with him. So he arrived in Rome, and he got there a couple of nights early and was out on having a good time, as you do. And he ended up being photographed swimming in one of the fountains with a couple of ladies. And the Pope promptly the next day cancelled his invitation to come meet. Anyway, I was asked to come and read some of it. He has some unpublished poems, and he'd always intended to have a second volume of poetry, and I was asked to come in and bring some of that stuff in. So if you're in the mood, I will read some of those poems. This one he titled "In the Blue Room." My brother said, I don't know if I should tell you what the story behind it.
I do.
You do? Said, well, it was when he was recovering from TB, and he spent a lot of time in the bed out back, and a lot of time by himself. But there was a maid there who, I guess who took pity on him. Anyway, so here's what happened. Here, in the blue room, the gloom moved over where she lay beside me. The maid made bed, came to life, dropping her apron. Then the street light from the window. She mounted me, told me what to do, not what she was doing. I did that which I did not know. It took long, it was hard. It is long and hard, she cried. Don't cry, she cried. Soon it will be Christmas. I thought of my mother, coming. She could come, any moment now, into my room. In my room, could, would, can, still come. Bursting through my door. It's like Irish water running. Kiss it, lick it, drink it, like the well in the holy field. I knelt that day. I done that last summer to cure my cold. I closed my eyes. This time, I closed my eyes. Nakedness was a sin, my mother said. I closed my eyes to commit nothing. Maybe it would cure my cold. She said something like, Christ is coming. She was praying then. I was taking the cure. Christ was coming. So was my mother. My mother is coming, I said amongst my prayer. Christ, she said, picking up her apron. Your mother again. She ever between us. It's a sickness you've got, not a cold. She left her knickers on the floor. They were my mother's. How would I explain it? This is a letter that he wrote that I thought was appropriate given the setting. It's a letter. Okay, so here it is. Beautiful, beautiful Munsters, pride of Limerick, toast of Ireland, envy of Cork. I told you with a little patience my induction would bear its just reward. What a pity Charlie St. George was not alive to bear witness. But don't for a moment think he was not there. Who do you think moved the goalpost to foil White's boot? The future of Irish rugby is firmly engraved in Limerick. but the Murphys and cohorts choose to ignore it with prejudicial vehemence. Once again, my congratulations, and to Mr. Quaid, I have not forgotten my description. Am I now your official mascot? Richard Harris. That was a letter he wrote to the editor. I thought this would be quite funny. This was a letter that he wrote. He'd been offered a part in the movie, and I think he was less than flattered. But anyway, so here's his response. Dear Terence, thank you so much for sending me the script of The Imposter of Baker Street. I would be grateful if you could let Michael Caine know how touched I was that he had thought of me. I'm not clear, however, why anyone would want me to play the part of Moriarty, which quite clearly could be phoned in by any reasonably competent actor. There is, of course, the possibility that the offer was predicated on the producer's need to augment the marquee value that the piece requires. In that case, you are authorized to proceed in offering them our rent-a-name option, which enables them to use any of the up to 13 letters which make up my name in any order or in any position, size or type that they require at a cost of $50,000 per letter. Thus, if you need the full Richard Harris, that would be $650,000. Abbreviations such as Rich, Har come proportionately cheaper, and this particular one would cost $350,000. Anagrams or any variations on the theme such as his dick are equally acceptable. In any event, any use of the rent-a-name plan carries with it work availability of 6 weeks plus 2 weeks free. I look forward to hearing from you the precise needs of those with whom you are negotiating. And I have a couple more poems if you're in the mood for a few more. This one, let's see, well, there's a couple here. These are sort of, well, they're love poems, really. All right. This one, we put on the back of the memorial service that we held for him. This was written in 1989. Something fell. He looked behind him. It was his heart. He tried to pick it up. He was moving too fast. He could not stop. He went around the block, retraced his steps, returning to where he heard it fall. He could not find it. He did not recognize it. He had disguised it. His fingers touched the emptiness in his breast. He recognized that perhaps nothing fell. Perhaps it was the sound of his longing falling onto the ground. The sound that startled him, reminded him of the lump at his feet that fell from the hole in his breast. Every day he remembered. Do you go?
Yeah.
This one, he has tons and tons of poems. I have no idea what the occasion was of many of them, but I mean, there's got to be easily 150 of them. That's the ones you can actually read, because he had a doctor's handwriting. It's impossible to decipher. Okay. I guess this one's called In Passing. In passing, as all things must, we, in passing, passed on a tiny portion of our inner to each other. In time, passing, as all things must, our sacrament, the glance, a nod, perhaps a smile, will awaken the forgotten pain of it all. In passing, as in the past, as all things must, we will, with eyes hidden from view, glance into backwards and face our whispering ghosts, laughing at each other, mocking in jest, jesting at the little foolishness of it all. In passing, as in the past, we become the past, as all things must. Good timing. It was smack in the middle of it. So then, keep going? What?
Yeah, please keep going. Can I just tell
Yes, go
people,
on.
Jared isn't kidding about the handwriting. He's reading from photocopies of his father's little notebooks and things, and he's doing remarkably well, isn't he?
This is actually well written for him.
Hello, so that's what he's reading from. It's the original, real original.
Okay. After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding of hands and claiming a soul. And you learn that love doesn't mean leaning, and company doesn't mean security. And you begin to learn that kisses aren't contracts, and presents aren't promises. And you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes ahead, with the grace of a woman or a man, not the grief of a child, and learn to build all your roads on today, because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans. And futures have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you ask too much. So you plant your own garden and decorate your own soul, instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And you learn that you really can endure, that you really are strong. I'm going to say, sorry. And you really do have worth. And you learn with every goodbye you learn. What I thought was interesting about that was, you know, I mean, he was, in a weird way, I'm going to say this to someone who was divorced twice from his wives, but very faithful. You know, he remained fantastic friends to both of his ex-wives. And, but beyond that, I never really knew anything about his romantic life, and I read a poem like that and I realize, of course, you know, we all yearn for love, and it's a surprising thing to discover in your parent, because of course your parents wear masks. You always they wear masks to their kids, and they don't. Anyway, I have one more?
Yeah,
Yes?
lovely.
Okay, so this is one he wrote on the when Richard Burton died, and he was good friends with Richard Burton, and it inspired him to write this poem. And he read it at the memorial service in New York. Richard Jenkins is dead, but Richard Burton is dead, only if you want to believe it. As bold as any boy that braved the bear of the black-faced pit, black as spades, his ace on shielded wings flew westwards and up like Pegasus, beyond the thunderous valley of his wails, across the threshold of our world, bouncing in echoes along the corridors of generations yet to come, in states unborn, in accents yet unknown. His youth was never young, just him and himself, father to his son, son to his father, married to his bone, born from his own womb to stage an aged-old dream. The eyes in bright, set in hollow, reached beyond the focus of his face to face a place his fate was placed in uncharted seas, where demons roared and angels flew in ever-increasing circles around the ring of his moon. Nailed to his own bondage in search of purer flight, he flew on wings as sharp as razor edge, across the battlefields of his stage, his rage roaring from the burn that burnt within, reached out in ringing chimes from his mighty might to ignite the dormant flame of our imagination. And imagine how cold a place we slept, had his voice not wept and poured upon us the wealth of his dream. The ancient druids, forever probing in test, to test the quality of his worth, bent his knees in weighty enterprise and smiled in satisfaction at the product of their progeny. though at times they stand in question. The discretion of his choice, realizing the frailty of his craft, they nodded knowingly. His voice had quested greater songs to sing, but those he sung had set the hearts a wonder in the magic of his word. Richard Jenkins is dead. Richard Burton is dead, only if we want to believe it. God gave, God taketh away, and who are we to question when the Almighty calls the mighty to his throne? Oh yes, the friends, his friends. Friends break, pound the ache and grief, condemned to walk the hollow earth in search of meaning at the loss. But deep below the blow that rendered all asunder, the cruel in his departure, must rest in the knowledge that he was, and because he was, and what he was, he is. And because he is, he will always be, always. And because he will always be always, then we will always be always. Richard Jenkins is dead. Richard Burton is dead, only if you want to believe it. He is forever, and in that deep eternal of his sphere, though the flame is quenched, the light will shine as long as memory holds a place in our distracted souls. The Welsh will claim their son, the world will mourn the man, but the grieved, the truly grieved, will grieve and cherish their grief and envy those, not only those who knew him deeper, but those who knew him longer. Richard Jenkins is dead. He sleeps in the arms of angels on the unstrained pastures of eternal rest. Richard Burton is dead, only to those who want to believe it. I thought it was kind of a praise. Wow.
Thank you very much, Gary. We're going to unveil the flag now.
Yes. Okay.
Can you look this way? Dominic, can you look this way when you're doing this?
Yeah.
Can you look this way when you're doing this? Thurs.
And after hearing that, you can see why we put Richard Harris, actor and writer. It's very well deserved.
Sorry. All the way. All the way. All the way, please. Like this?
Yeah. So your stomach. Can you go that way a bit, Dominic?
There's two more things to do before we finish. First, you wouldn't want me to finish without thanking Moreau here, who has been a wonderful landlord. He's hosted the event so well. So our thanks to Moreau. He has been so good. And several people well known in Limerick have recognised themselves on the front.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Because those of us, even those of us who are blow-ins, are very proud of Limerick. And hopefully will become even prouder when we become the City of Culture in 2020. There are some sandwiches and some drinks coming out now, you're very welcome. Just one other person I'd like to mention. Limerick was put on the world stage a little bit in theatre in New York, and the director, Liam O'Brien, is over there. He came back with Miles, and they brought the trophy back, so congratulations, Liam, and well done. Woo! And now I think Zeb just wants to say a couple of words at the end, if he's there somewhere. Zeb?
Yes.
Thanks so much now at the stage. Can you get in there again?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming this evening, and thank you to the Limerick Writers Centre and to Donald and Dominic. Guys, we're running against time at the moment, and we have a workshop with Stephanie Yolland and Sean McConville, who I just spotted there in the corner, which was supposed to start at 7. We'll run a bit late, lads, don't worry. But guys, This festival is not going to continue without the support of you guys, the Limerick supporters of film. Please, please do tell your friends, families, and get into the screenings. It's most important that we show these filmmakers that we've brought in from all over the world. We've people from Australia, Thailand, California, Berlin, everywhere, all over the world, and these guys deserve your support. So please do help and buy a ticket and go to a screening. Please do. Thank you.
There we go, the first event of Richard Harris International Film Festival, and this has been a good start. Let's hope the rest of it goes as well, and I'm sure it will. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Well, I don't.
From the field of dreams to the silver screen, I played the game of life. I was wild, a loner exiled, till the day I took flight. Hell-raising days, they were crazy days, played the field all night long. Had the booze and the blues, got the demons too, from wine, women and song. I'm a man called Harris, a pilgrim to the end. Proud to be a Limerick man, I echo in the wind. Yes, a man called Harris, a hero and a fool, born and raised by the treaty stone. Oh, Limerick, you're my jewel. Yes, Limerick, you're my jewel.